Selamat sore teman-teman, selamat datang di Makassar International Writers Festival. Saya ingin memberitahukan bahwa panel ini dalam bahasa Inggris. Untuk mendengarkan dalam bahasa Indonesia, teman-teman di Zoom bisa klik logo translation pada layar bagian bawah. Pertanyaan untuk pembicara bisa disampaikan lewat chat maupun YouTube dalam bahasa Indonesia maupun bahasa Inggris. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Makassar International Writers Festival 2021. Please make sure that you turn off your camera and microphone. If you have any questions, please use the chat box. Questions can be in English or in Bahasa Indonesia. Makassar International Writers Festival has been organized by Rumata Art Space in Makassar since 2011. It received the International Excellence Award as the Best Literary Festival 2020 from the London Book Fair. It's the first international writers festival in Eastern Indonesia, run independently by volunteers. The festival is inclusive and it advocates anti-corruption, zero waste, and no all-male panel policy. Please learn about Makassar International Writers Festival on the website makassarwriters.com. If you would like to share this event on social media, please use the hashtag MIWF 2021, MIWF 2021. So my name is Intan Paramadita. I'm an author and one of the curators of this year's festival. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and so is one of our speakers, Omid Tofigian. So I would like to open with Welcome to Country as an acknowledgement that Australia was and will always be Aboriginal land. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live, in my case, the Gadigal and Wangal peoples of the Eora Nation. I pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So the theme of our festival this year is Anthropos, a global reduction of human activity, especially travel, as an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is really the time for us to rethink what is mobility, who can travel, who can transcend boundaries, who encounters walls and borders. In Western countries, the idea of traveling for education has been around since 17th century with the Grand Tour, where elite men, sons of aristocrats, traveled for enrichment. In our lives, BC, before COVID, travel was often taken for granted. It was perceived as a normal activity or a lifestyle for people from wealthier parts of the world and people from a certain class. But of course, travel was and will not be accessible for everyone. And since last year, all of us have been experiencing restricted movement and border closure. And because of that, we have to critically assess the access and privilege made possible by our mobility. But if we think about the lack of mobility, what is it? Is it the same for everyone? Asylum seekers and refugees did not have the privilege of mobility before COVID. So what does immobility mean to them in the time of the pandemic? Today's topic is immobility and displacement. We are going to explore the questions of what immobility means for people who have been displaced. How do people tell stories of immobility? More importantly, how do people tell stories of resilience, of survival, of fight? So we are going to hear from writers who tell stories to reflect on the experiences of immobility and displacement. We are very honored today to have our distinguished speakers. There are 5 people here, author and journalist Behrooz Boochani and translator and scholar Omid Tawfiqian. And we also have 3 writers from the Archipelago Collective, Warsan Wisan, J.N. Joniat, and Irfan Dana. Before we continue, I'm going to show 2 clips that show a range of storytelling possibilities that reflect on the refugee experience. The first clip that we're going to show is a trailer from Chauka. Please tell us the time. This is a 2017 film by Behrooz Boochani and Arash Kamali Sarvestani. It was shot by Behrooz from the inside of Australia's Manus Island Detention Center. It was shot on a smuggled mobile phone and then edited by his co-director in the Netherlands. And then the second clip that we will show is a short video by Ali Frogi, who is part of the Archipelago Collective. The clip was recorded during the peaceful demonstrations in front of the UNHCR office in Makassar. So the refugees in Indonesia are demanding a faster processing of their resettlement documents. And currently, there are 14,000 refugees and asylum seekers who are stuck in Indonesia as Australia closed its borders in mid-2013. So can we show the 2 clips? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank the tech team. They're working really hard to prepare this panel. So yeah, those are the two clips, and you can see how people tell stories of displacement and immobility through audio-visual medium in addition to writing. And if you have any questions about those two videos, well, one is a trailer, and questions, general questions to our speakers, you can use the chat box. You can ask questions in Bahasa Indonesia or in English. So I will now introduce the first two speakers and give a general overview of the Archipelago Collective. And then we will chat with Beruz and Ahmed. And after that, I will give a more detailed introduction of the three writers from the Archipelago team, and we'll learn more about their work. So Beruz Wuchani is Adjunct Associate Professor of Social Sciences at University of New South Wales and a writer in residence at University of Canterbury, New Zealand. He is an author and journalist based in New Zealand who was incarcerated as a political prisoner by the Australian government on Manus Island, Papua New Guinea, from 2013 to 2019. His book, No Friend But the Mountains, Writing from Manus Prison, has won numerous awards, including the 2019 Victorian Prize for Literature. Wuchani is also affiliated with Birkbeck Law, University of London, University of Melbourne, and University of Sydney. He is co-director with Arash Kamali Sarvestani of the 2017 feature-length film Chauka, Please Tell Us the Time, which we have just seen the trailer. And then our second speaker is Omid Taufigian. Omid Taufigian is an award-winning lecturer, researcher, and community advocate, combining philosophy with interest in citizen media, popular culture, displacement, and discrimination. He is affiliated with University of New South Wales, Birkbeck Law, University of London, and University of Sydney. His publications include Myth and Philosophy in Platonic Dialogues, translation of Beruz Wuchani's multi-award-winning book, No Friend But the Mountains, Writing from Manus Prison, and he is the co-editor of special issues for journals, literature, and aesthetics, Alphaville, Journal of Film and Screen Media, and Southerly. And then I'm going to introduce the Archipelago Collective. So if the tech team can share the PowerPoint slide, that will be fantastic. So the Archipelago is, thank you. The Archipelago is a writers' collective that builds community and mentorship with refugee and migrant background writers. The collective was founded to train new writers who are refugees in Indonesia towards professional publication and to forge relationship between writers across islands. If you go to the next slide, you will see some works produced by Archipelago writers and artists. So these people published the Archipelago Literary Magazine, a home for new literature and art that explores migration, identity, and decolonization. The Archipelago was initiated by Warsan Witsan, Kieran Kruzevich Salazar, and J.N. Joniet. Kieran has helped us organize this panel, so thank you, Kieran. Okay, so, all right, thank you. So now I'm going to have a conversation with Beruz and Omid. So we'll do that, and then after that we'll go to the Archipelago writers. So I'll start with the first topic will be about Beruz's book, No Friend But the Mountains. So Beruz, in your Sydney TED Talk, you mentioned that writing is an act of resistance. Was this the reason why you wrote about life in Manus prison in your book, No Friend But the Mountains? Perhaps you could tell us more about the idea behind the book. Or you're still muted.
Yeah.
Thank
you
you
very much for having us. I would like to say hello to everyone, and also I'm happy that Jonaid and Erfan are here. They participated in the event, yeah, which is really great, and I'm happy about that we hear them as well. I know both of them. We have been in touch sometimes. So about the resistance, actually, so I think that is a very key point in the context of Manus Island refugees and the policy towards the refugees in Australia, and that is very related to my background as a court. That, as you know, that I and Omid, we always work on the colonialism system and mentality, and we believe that the policy towards the refugees in Australia, in offshore and in onshore, is established on based off the colonialism mentality and the history of colonialism in Australia, which is very clear for us, and we really work in this way to introduce it to Australia. And that is very related to my background as a Kurd, that Kurdistan has been colonized by the countries in Middle East. And so that created the history of resistance and the culture of resistance in Kurdistan. And when I arrived in Australia and they banished me to Manus Island, I faced another system, another colony, another colonialism system. And that's why I think the key point of our work in Manus Island is about this. And so in Manus Island, if we talk about the resistance, we see the resistance by the refugees, how Omid mentioned very well in the book and in the articles that he described. Actually, he created this picture that we have two islands. One of them is a small island, which is Manus Island, and one of them is a bigger island, which is Australia, and how these two islands impact on each other. And I think we should understand that through the resistance, in Manus Island. And this resistance is not my resistance. This resistance is the refugees' resistance, which has a really a history that, for example, on 2014, on February 2014, the refugees did a riot, yeah. And after that, on 2015, we had a hunger strike that like 700 people participated. And later on 2017, we were resisting in front of the system because they wanted to relocate us to new places. But this resistance is not only through that kind of resistance, not only hunger strike or doing protests. This resistance is more than that. This resistance is how we have impacted on Australian political culture through our work, through our artistic works that many refugees have been writing, and through art, through music. And I think that is very important. That's why I say that writing as an act of resistance, So writing here is a weapon to challenge the whole system, to expose the system, and also to introduce the refugees as a human, to getting freedom, to creating hope, to generally challenge the system. So we can talk about the details, that what does mean by that resistance, but that is the general picture about our work and resistance. And I think so Irfan and Johnny, they will talk about this, that in New Zealand we have this kind of resistance as well, because they are writing as well, they have been protesting. So I prefer that they talk about this. They have this life experience and they have been working that field. Yeah, but in Manusala and Nauru, I think that is really remarkable. Historically, is remarkable, that resistance.
Yeah, thank you, Baruz. I'm taking notes furiously here. It's so you mentioned that there are different forms of resistance, the rioting and the writing, so they're quite similar. So people refuse to remain silent. Thank you for talking about writing as a weapon to challenge the system. I'm just going to, before I move to Omid, I want to talk about the translation, but what I reread this book, No Friend But the Mountains, today, and then there's one particular part which is about your travel from Indonesia to Australia. You are in the boat, and the way that you describe it is that situation is very vivid and visceral. How in the boat, I'm just going to read from the passage. It's a mess. Bodies are twisted into one another. Even the normal physical boundaries between families has fallen apart. Men lie in the arms of another wife. Children lie on the chests and bellies of strangers. So I find that this description, it really it conveys something that journalism cannot. There's that it's more emotional, I feel. So I guess my question is how the format of this book, this transcends the memoir genre, right? It's your story, but it's also the stories of others. And they are woven beautifully into prose and poetry. So, but you are a journalist, so maybe you could tell us more about the style of this novel. As a journalist, do you think that fiction serves as a medium of resistance in a different way from nonfiction?
Yeah, I think, thank you for raising that question. It's very important because in my work in Manus Island as a journalist, so for many years I was writing, I was publishing, internationally, but mostly in Australia. So in those works, actually, I found out and I realized that journalism is not a strong language to challenge the system, to expose the system. And I thought that literature is a strong and powerful language, that we describe what is systematic torture means, and so just to take the readers into the prison camp to experience and witness our lives, as the detainees. So that's why I always, criticize the current journalism language. And that's why I get distance from journalism in this book. And I try to really, write the literary piece and a piece of art. So that's why, but still, in the book you see, because of my background as a journalist, still there is the journalism language exists in the book, but I was trying to get distance from journalism. Of course, journalism is important, but the problem with journalism is that through journalism, just you make people aware, which is not enough, and now, most of people are, in Australia are aware of, what's happening in Manus Island, in Nauru, and also in Indonesia. Many people are aware of that. But the problem is that we don't see any action. And so that doesn't happen through journalism. And also journalism rely on official languages, rely on the language which used and created by the government, created by the power structure. And that's why I think, literature is important. As it's not only literature, I mean art, because through art, we are able to, challenge the images which already created about the refugees. We challenge the perspective towards the refugees.
Yeah, I agree. So that's why, I mean, when you use official language, you can, you can reproduce violence that's imposed by the system. That's probably why you use the term Manus prison instead of Manus processing center.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That is one of the examples.
Yeah.
So we call it exile policy.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so I'm going to ask Omid now about the process of translating this book, because this is quite fascinating. It's a 400-page book, but it started as WhatsApp text messages, which Behrooz wrote via a smuggled mobile phone, because you were not allowed to have a mobile phone, right, in Manus prison. So how challenging was the process of translation for you?
Yeah, thanks for raising that, and thanks for having me here today. It's wonderful to be amongst all these excellent writers. I'm going to start by acknowledging the land that I'm on, the land of the Darramaragal people. But I work often on Gadigal land, Eora Nation, and I think it's really important to start that way, because I see Behrouz's work as a decolonial intervention. And so my translation of Behrouz's work was also a decolonial intervention. So, you had these two forces, these two wills coming together, and we combined with a whole team of people, of consultants, confidants, who all contributed to the translation process. So that was really significant. And I think this is a testament to the power in collective activism, or in collective struggle. And I think it's really important here to understand how the translation took shape. I was working with Behrouz for a long time before he proposed the book project. So of course he was writing the book, and he was sending messages to Munis Mansoubi, who is his first translator. And she was collecting these messages and putting them, based on Behrouz's instructions, putting them into chapters. And by the time I took on the project, Behrouz had written about 30%, and Munis had made PDF files of the early chapters. So I was translating Behrouz's journalism first, and not being trained as a translator, I thought that journalism was doable. I mean, I was comfortable with doing that, and also we were involved in different kinds of activism, strategizing about different ways to challenge the system. But when he told me that he was thinking about me for the translation of the book, I got really anxious, because journalism is one thing, literature is something else. And so I was very anxious about it, but I thought if I give up this opportunity, I'll never forgive myself, because I already knew what important work he was doing, how powerful his work was, the impact that it was having, and I could already see the possibilities for the future. And so when I started reading his book, the compilation of text messages, from after the third page, I realized that this was going to be a masterpiece. So, like I said, not only is the book a decolonial intervention, but the translation process was very decolonial and very deconstructive. We were creating whole new ways of engaging, whole new ways of resisting through the translation process. And I think not only was my background of displacement and exile important here for understanding what Behruz was doing, not only was my experience in Australia, particularly with racism in Australia and Australia's colonial history, important for translating Behruz's book, but also a deep appreciation of different forms of colonialism in different parts of the world. So I had to do a lot of research to understand Behruz's references to Kurdistan and Kurdish intellectual and artistic history and political history. So here what I was noticing was there were all these different layers to the book that I had to unpack myself. I had to bring in many things from my own experience, my own training, my own research, my own experience. But also I had to do a lot of extra work to think about what was taking place here. So I think about Behruz's book as an anti-genre. So not only is there elements of his journalism, there's also philosophical ruminations, there's psychoanalytic examination, there's political commentary, there's testimony, there's more formal accounts of what was taking place. But then we also have myth and folklore and epic and poetry, of course. So I think the magic really took place in how all of these things work together. And of course, all the different contributions that people were making as we were going through the translation process, to think of the best ways to actually convey what Behruz was doing. Because what he was translating, what he was writing and what we were translating was something completely new. And it needed a new imagination, a new way of thinking, new terminology. So in some cases, we even created new words to represent what Behruz was introducing as neologisms, basically new ideas, new concepts, new terms. We had to sometimes even create new terms in the translation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your very comprehensive answer. I think it's really important to remind us of that that translating is an act of decolonial intervention. I think it's we all need to be reminded. Yesterday we had a panel on translation, and the translators talked about what feminist translation is like. So I think it's really important to keep thinking about what decolonial translation looks like. I would like to know more about translation, and I'm sure people have questions, but we'll come back to that. Maybe to give a sense of No Friend But the Mountains, especially for the people who haven't read it. You all should read it. It's wonderful. Maybe you could read an excerpt from the book.
I've got a couple of excerpts here that I think will really resonate with the audience, and especially acknowledging and showing respect to our hosts in Indonesia. I've picked a passage from the chapter that you referred to, Intan, about the journey the journey to the shore to take the boat to Australia.
What page is that? Sorry. What page is that? so I can read it. Yeah.
I'm going to start reading on page 6. Okay, and why I thought this would be important, not just because it refers to Indonesia, but also because in amongst this really horrible situation, this really bleak moment, a time when everyone's lives are basically on the edge, and tensions are high, Behrooz was able to find moments of beauty. And I think this in itself is a form of resistance, to not succumb to the conditions, but to find something that creates a rupture, a crack, an opening. So basically the refugees are in a truck going to the shore. The trucks race on through the dense jungle, disrupting the silence of the night. After sitting on the wooden floor of the truck for hours, the weariness is obvious on everyone's face. One or two people have vomited, throwing up everything they have eaten into plastic containers. In another corner of the truck is a Sri Lankan couple and an infant child. The passengers are mainly Iranian, Kurdish, Iraqi, and you can see they are fascinated by the presence of a Sri Lankan family among them. The woman is extraordinarily beautiful with dark eyes. She sits holding her baby, which is still breastfeeding, in her arms. Her partner tries to comfort them. He cares for them the best he can. He needs her to know that he is there to support them. During the whole trip, the man seems to try and reassure her by massaging her shoulders and holding her tight as a truck jolts violently over the bumpy road. But you can see the woman's only concern is her small child. The scene in that corner is love, glorious and pure. She is pale, however, and throws up at one point into a container her husband brings over. Their past is unknown to me. Maybe their love brought with it the difficulties that drove them to this terrifying night. Clearly, their love has endured it all. It is manifested in the care of this young child. No doubt their hearts and thoughts are also marked by the experiences that caused them to flee their homeland. On the trucks are children of all ages, children on the verge of adulthood, whole families. A loud, obnoxious, and completely inconsiderate Kurdish guy forces everyone to breathe his cigarette smoke throughout the trip. He is accompanied by a gaunt wife, adult son, and another son, a little bastard. This son has his mother's physical features and his father's character. He is so loud he torments the whole truck, treating everything as a joke and annoying everyone with his impatient and disruptive manner. He even gets on the nerves of the smuggler, who yells at him. For sure, I think, when the boy grows up, he will be 100 times more thoughtless than his father. The truck slow. It seems we have reached the end of the jungle and arrived at the shore. The smuggler begins waving his hand fervently over. Everyone must keep silent. The vehicle stops. Silence. Silence. Even the noisy little bastard understands that he has to be silent. Our fear is justified. We are afraid of being caught by the police. On many previous occasions, travelers have even been arrested right on the edge of the shore before everyone has boarded the boat. No one utters a sound. The Sri Lankan baby silently clings to its mother's breasts, gazing but not feeding. The slightest sound or cry could ruin everything. 3 months of wandering, displaced and hungry in Jakarta and Kendari. Everything depends on silence. This final phase on the beach. I think what's beautiful about that. Sorry?
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing it with us.
My pleasure. I think what's also beautiful about that is also Behrouz's sense of humor. There's a very dark sense of humor, and there's something I learned as well during the translation process, was that there's something particularly Kurdish about that kind of humor.
Oh, okay. All right. So there's the cultural element. When I read this, I just thought that, well, this is quite dark. This is funny, but quite dark. But yeah, thanks for explaining the cultural dimension. Yeah, I mean, just from that passage that you read, it's like a mixture of everything, right? It's very affective without being, sentimental. Like it's about this fleeting encounter with another family, with a family, and then suddenly you have this guy who can't stop smoking, and then suddenly there's fear. So everything is kind of in that one journey. All emotions are sort of in one bowl, actually. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I guess because we are now talking about storytelling, what I would like to ask you as well is that in terms of representation, because you are also, as a professor, you're also working with literature and media. We know that in the past 2 decades, there has been a new wave of sort of humanitarian refugee themed films and reality TV. For instance, in Australia, there's this reality TV show, Go Back to Where You Came From, where they have all the Western subjects, and then they put these Western subjects in the shoes of the refugees, and then they experience transformation. What do you think about these representations, and what's missing, and why is it? What intervention can refugee writers and artists make in the sphere of representation?
Actually, I think Behruz has an excellent critique of this kind of celebrity culture that is connected with the experience of displacement and exile. So he may have some really important comments to make, but very briefly from my own position, from my own analysis, I think it's important to understand that what we're facing, like Behruz really critically, really profoundly explain, is that we're dealing with a whole system, and this system is like it encompasses so much. There's an ideology, there's a political economy, there are images, as Behruz pointed out. So there's so much associated with this system, and we call it hierarchical system, which is actually derived from a radical feminist concept. And Behruz in Farsi uses the term system hakem. He actually created that term. So this hierarchical system that we're dealing with, one aspect of that is the refugee industry. And the refugee industry needs to be seen as something that spans across the whole spectrum of politics. So people who support refugees to people who are against refugees and everything in between. And in this, we have, a whole range of things: academics doing research on refugees, art projects, films, books, forms of activism. It seems like majority of the people who are benefiting from this refugee industry are people who have citizen privilege. So it's not the refugees who are actually becoming empowered, gaining freedom, creating opportunities, making use of resources from this particular industry. And what's dangerous about the industry is it reinforces particular kinds of tropes, particular kinds of stereotypes. And one of them is these tropes or these ideas associated with liberal humanitarianism. So what I love about Behruz's work, and what he does that other people have not done, in many cases have failed to do, is he doesn't appeal to this kind of liberal humanitarianism. He refuses to say why he left Iran. He refuses to talk about his story. He refuses to humanize himself in the eyes of people with citizen privilege and say, this is what I've gone through, you should treat me as a human being. He's saying, no, this book is your problem. You need to deal with it. You need to confront the violence that is part of your culture, your systems, your leaders, your background, your history. He's basically saying, I'm not going to play according to your rules. I'm not going to give you what you expect. And he puts up a mirror to this hierarchical system. So I think that's one of the things. There was another part of your question as well, apart from.
What intervention can refugee writers and artists make?
Yeah, I think one of the important interventions that, especially from writers and artists, is challenging the narrative, creating a whole new narrative, and that's one of the most radical things, because stats, figures, data, all of these sorts of things, this rational approach, trying to combat with logic, hasn't worked. And it can be manipulated and misinterpreted and exploited in different ways and taken in directions it wasn't intended. But what art does, what creativity does, it creates a rupture, it creates a new way of imagining. And I think that's what No Friend But the Mountains does.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, a liberal humanitarian framework in the refugee representation, it can sort of, it highlights the problem, but at the same time depoliticizes the problem. And I think that's why it's important to have an intervention from people like Behrouz. Behrouz, do you want to add something regarding these issues of representation?
Yeah, I think so. What Omid said was very important, so I don't want to repeat that. So just I want to shift the discussion about. I think it's very simple. The stories of the refugees should be written by the refugees themselves. It's very simple. And that is not only with the refugees, with the minorities, indigenous and marginalized people. They should write their stories. They should, tell their stories. And I think what is the duty of the people who are working with the refugees is just to create a space for them, that their voices be heard. And I think that is very remarkable with what Omid does. I think Omid mentioned the decolonization. I think what Omid and the way Omid is working is a kind of decolonization of activism and how to work with the refugees. That is very important, and Omid, it can be a very good example that all of us, we should learn. Even I, as a refugee, I should learn from that. And I think the refugees, in the Western countries, they look at the refugees just as people who are voiceless, but the refugees have voice, and sometimes they accept them just as a weakness. I think the refugees are not only weakness, they should be a part of the main discourse. They should be the owner of the discourse. That's why I think, for all of the refugees who write, not only writing, creating, making art, like Jonate, Irfan, and, they are very important, in this field. They are important people because they are, sharing their stories. And they with life through their life experience, and it's not only with through life experience, they have their own analyze and their own understanding, and that is a knowledge. That is what Omid mentioned, challenging the narrative, changing the narrative, creating a new language and perspective towards the refugees, and challenge the images about the refugees. I think that is very important. So the refugees shouldn't be just marginalized in their own stories, in their own discourse. This discourse belong to the refugees, and they should just take control of it by creating art and writing.
Yeah, thank you. So I think you're absolutely right that the refugee writers or artists, creators, they should own the discourse, right? So in the interest of time, I guess I still have so many questions, but I'm just going to ask you one more question before we move on to the Archipelago writers, and since you mentioned them anyway. So maybe because we've shown Chauka, a trailer of Chauka at the beginning. Maybe you can talk more a little bit about the film, like why. So you are a writer, but you tell this story through audiovisual medium, and you can what we can see there is a lot of boredom and silence, and also the imagery of confinement. We see window frames. I mean, you can look at the sea, but you are sort of there's a barrier, there's the window, there's the fences. So what do you want to convey? What do you want to say about this everyday life in the prison?
Yeah, I think when we talk about Choka, we really first we should talk about the the indigenous side of the movie, because sometimes I feel that the movie is about the indigenous people in Manus Island rather than the refugees, and so in the movie is more clear compared to the book. In the book is very clear as well, but in its own way. But in the movie is visual, so it's very important that there is a shot in the movie that the local people, they just gather somewhere and they raise the flag of Papua New Guinea, and that is quite it can be ridiculous as well, because that country is not independent actually, and is the Australian government is using their land as a land of exile, but in other side they are celebrating the national day by raising a flag. So I mean, that is very important in the movie. But in what you said about the silent and that, I think that is something that people, I think the key concept in the movie is about time and how that system established on based of torture by time, torture through time, and that is very important. At beginning you mentioned about the the refugees in Indonesia. If we talk about them, everywhere is like that, waiting, and that is important. And you mentioned too that the process should be faster, for the refugees. So I mean, so in Manus Island is very critical. It's very important. Time and daily life, just people are, they are wasting their lives in that system. And so prison is not a place that everywhere just so that is a huge violence that's silent. That is a huge violence. That is a torture, so violence is not mean that just guards come and beat the refugees, or damage them physically. Torture is happen through that silent. That's why in the movie the most of the shots are long shots with silent, and even the audience, they find it quite boring sometimes because the shots are long, and that is life inside the prison camp.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. The long take is can be quite painful, but you it's just a glimpse of the refugee life. You can never you can never put yourself in the shoes of refugees because you're not there. But thank you for reminding me about time and how when we think about mobility, what you were saying reminds me of how people are being deprived of the right to mobility through space and time. So their life is basically being taken away, so many years gone by. So thank you for that. So I still have so many questions, but we should move to the Archipelago and their exciting projects. So thank you, Behruz and Omid. We'll get back to you later. Can we show the posters of the Archipelago writers? I'm going to introduce them now. Halo, tech team bisa menayangkan posternya. Saya akan memperkenalkan Warsan. Warsan Witsan. So Warsan is a refugee from Africa. Hi, Warsan. She has lived in Indonesia for the last 4 years as a refugee on her own, and she is 27 years old. She is co-director of an Archipelago-wide writing collective, the Archipelago. Warsan aims to be a great writer and leading influence for women. She believes she can help many people who are currently voiceless in society using her life experience since she was a child and her experiences in Indonesia as the basis of her writing. She is currently writing biographical fiction and news articles. She wants her writing to uncover the social and cultural problems facing refugees and refugee children. She believes her writing can support many women facing similar experiences. Our next speaker is J.N. Jonyat. So maybe we can show Jonyat's poster there. So J.N. Jonyat is a Rohingya journalist and an editor at the archipelago.org. He is a student of political science and human rights activist. He was formerly an engineering and physics student in Myanmar before being forced to flee to Indonesia. Jonyat contributes to films and publishes accounts of refugees searching for a safe and durable solution. And then the final speaker that I will introduce is Erfan Dana or Shams Hussaini. So Shams Hussaini, known as Erfan, is 22 years of age. He is a Hazara refugee originally from Afghanistan. Erfan is a writer, refugee activist, volunteer, and interpreter for refugees. He felt threatened and obliged to flee his motherland due to ongoing war and everyday fighting in Afghanistan. He left Afghanistan in late 2014 and arrived in Indonesia at the beginning of 2015. Since then, he has been living in a state of constant uncertainty in Indonesian refugee camps. So those are our three speakers from the Archipelago. So let's start with the Archipelago. What is it? What is the Archipelago? What's the story behind the project? Anyone can start.
Yeah, good afternoon for everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm so happy to have me here. Thank you, Intan. You're nice welcoming here today. Is my voice clear?
Yeah. Yes.
The Archipelago is a group of writers that we started at the end of 2019 in Great Jakarta. Also, this group of writers is based on refugee and immigrant. Me and Karen, 2019, we want to call the refugee writers in Jakarta and Sisharwa. We start writing workshops, writing discussion, and writing together. The Archipelago is a large diversity magazine different country, different culture, and different. And the most important thing, the Archipelago is a platform free for refugees and immigrants to publish their voice for freedomly. And we was working hard to give advice and guideline and give the fill up the gap of media that the immigrant people doesn't get it. And it is not only to take their voices, also that we have a dream of writers. Like as a person, I have a dream to be a great writer in the future. So my article is about refugees, not only to have telling the refugee stories, also showing the strength, creativity, and talent that the immigrant people have to their own dream to work on it. In the Archipelago, we see this is a real need for in Indonesia refugee to have a space to publish their writing, to building their dreams, and to have create connections. And also the Archipelago working create a connection between islands, like in Indonesia, the rest of Asia, Australia, and all that people coming together. The title of journalist, arts, photography, and discover for new ideas. So that is the Archipelago from my words to explain on it. And really, we have lucky to have you to here today. I will give to Chen Nayat if he adds something. Thank you.
Thank you, Warson, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, everyone, for this wonderful events. I'm very delighted to be here to finally say something about refugee situation in Indonesia. Well, the first thing about the archipelago is very important thing. It's the first established archipelago that refugees have the freedom to publish their stories, their work, and spread their voice. Well, personally speaking, before there was any magazine for refugees, I've been writing for years, like many years, or even when I was in detention. And I faced a lot of difficulties to get my published or my writing out there to publish. And because I didn't have good network and I didn't know how to do that. I was not a journalist. I came from physics background. So, but I was forced to write by the circumstances I faced in the detention. Then and I was looking for a good platform, and I published my article in the Indonesian media Tempo. That was my first article, and then I was looking for something better to do to reach out to international media. Then so this is, and I struggled a lot along the way to finally reach out to international media because there was no channel for refugees, to like get to the international media and then get networks. So what Archipelago is exactly doing right now is not only publishing refugees stories, but also helping refugees with networking with the international media and editing their writings so that it can be acceptable, newsworthy to the international media. So I think it's an important work that we have established, and it will help a lot of refugees in the future, which means we are creating a new voice, a new channel, a new door for refugees with the Archipelago. In that way, Archipelago is not only a voice, we're also trying to, create some sort of livelihood activities for Archipelago. As we can see, a lot of refugees in Indonesia are deprived of work of right, and many refugees are suffering due to lack of rights. So, and financial insecurity is one of the things many refugees are suffering from mentally. So that's why we're kind of like trying to create also some sort of livelihood. In that way, we pay the writers, in a voluntary stipends, and the way somehow they can, find an activities, to write. And it's also a form of motivation, to motivate the writers to write more. And Archipelago is also one of the things that is trying to create an understandings between, Indonesians and the refugee community. One of the things that refugees are suffering in Indonesia is because lack of educations about refugees, and people have been, ill-informed about refugees in Indonesia. And that's because the agencies and the governments are kind of like trying to hide refugees existence in Indonesia, and there where the citizens get very, very lack informations. So Archipelago is trying to create another educational channel between the refugee and Indonesia, so that they can cooperate together and then, raise the issue together. Once the both community are educated, mutually about each other's, then they will be able to work together. And that's one of the Archipelago goal. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Irfan, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you, Intan, for having me. And Junaid and Warsan have clearly explained in a very detailed way the mission of Archipelago and the work that the Archipelago has been doing and continue to do. But I want to just briefly add a few things. Archipelago is an online magazine. It is a home for literature and art and migration. The Archipelago monitor the refugee and migrant background writers and help them toward professional publication. It also builds a connection between refugee writers across Indonesia and also across the world. Archipelago is a place where refugees can publish their own voice, their own work, and it's not being censored. The good thing about Archipelago is that every refugee, every Indonesian, and every vulnerable person can have access, and they can publish their own voice, their own work without being censored. So it can leave a very positive impact on the readers who read their work. We have many websites and we have journalists writing about the refugee crisis across the world in refugee camps in many places. But what is important is that you hear from the refugee themselves. You hear the refugees struggle and fight from themselves, from their own voice, from the way they tell their story. I think this is the best thing about the Archipelago, that we share or publish our own work without it being censored. So it also, forges or builds in a connection, international connection. So when we get connected with the world, with the journalists, with the media, with humanitarian organizations or with organizations responsible for dealing with migration issues in Indonesia, they do not only see us as a refugee, but they also view us as a writers, as a positive people, who can leave a positive impact on the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Junaid, Irfan, and Warsan. I think that's really great, and then I like how you state firmly that this is not only about being refugees, but also being writers. And so you have writers concerned because writers, they want to connect, they want to learn from each other about editing, about improving their crafts, about being in the network, how to, like Janiat, what you said, how to make your story newsworthy. We all need to put ourselves in the network. And I think it's good that you mentioned about the connection across Archipelago, because, if you, people who haven't been to Indonesia would probably have no idea how big it is. So that's why, having that network connecting refugees from different places in Indonesia, I think that's really important, and then making it really a space not only for expression but also for education, like educating the other people about the refugee issues, because they are probably but they're not aware, or like what Behruz mentioned, they're aware, but they don't act, they don't do anything. So I would like to know more about each of you in terms of your writing. So Behruz mentioned that writing is an act of resistance, but maybe you have your different reasons for writing. You know, writing can be an act of other things, an act of care, for instance, caring for the community, caring for yourself. So why do you write? We can start with Erfan, and then Janayat, and then Warsan.
Exactly. I totally agree with Behruz's journey. I love his work, I love his writing. Then I have a very deep respect for what he has done to change the situation for himself and for his fellow refugee brothers and sisters. As Behruz said, that writing is a weapon in the fight against an unjust system and political structure that, you know, inflicts harm and suffering on the souls of vulnerable people. You know, for me, you know, writing has become part of my life. It is a trophy for me. As a refugee, I live in a horrible situation. I always feel, you know, sad and have a very close and deep relationship with pen. You know, I write to escape from this sadness and pain that I grapple with in my day-to-day life. You know, I cannot put my pen down. If I put my pen down, it means I put myself and the lives of those that relied on me down. If I stop writing, I stop my struggle for survival. If I don't write, if I stop writing, I cannot attract the attention of the media towards the refugee crisis that is unfolding in Indonesia. So when I write, I raise the forgotten voices of refugees, you know, trapped in Indonesia in limbo for nearly a decade now. I totally agree with Behruz that it is an act of resistance. You resist, you struggle for survival, and you try to challenge a system that is trying to inflict harm on your body, on your soul, on your existence. We are already we are already affected with lots of harm when we are waiting for unremitting, you know, uncertainty. We are already affected badly, but when a system that is trying to cause harm to us, then one way that we can challenge that system is to write. And when we write, you feel empathy. You feel empathy. When something heavy is stuck on your inside, and you can find another way to empathy that heavy feeling or that pain, you try to turn up to writing.
Okay.
So when I was still locked up in detention centers behind the high, you know, the high walls of detention centers, I had no activities. Let alone, you know, having to access to enough food or educational, you know, resources. You know, I was wondering what to do. Then I developed passion for writing. I became connected with many media, with a large network of people living outside the Indonesia. And since then, I have been, you know, continuously writing and raising the voice of refugees. The challenges that we go through and grapple with in our day-to-day life for the world to hear. So writing for me is a way of sharing my problems and the problems of my fellow refugee brothers trapped in Indonesia for many years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I like that. I can't put my pen down. I like your the way you put it. Thank you. So Janayat, you wanna share why you write?
Well, what I can say about writing, well, basically, initially I was not a writer. I was studying physics, and I have no intention of becoming a writer or journalist. So when I come to Indonesia, when I saw the situation, how refugees are treated very injustically when they are just simply seeking safety and security after fleeing war and conflict from their world. And then not only because of the system, because of the politics, but also because the way people treat them, see them as different people, as aliens, as less human beings. And that's what made me anger. That's what made me frustrated. And I couldn't do anything, to show my anger to the world. If I do protest, they're gonna arrest me. If I say anything, they're gonna abuse me. So what should I do? I need to do something to show my anger to the world that refugees are human beings and they should not be treated this way, and they should be treated with humanly, with human right and respect as every citizen of the world. Then I was thinking, and finally I found a way to express my feeling, my anger to the world, and that's what I have been doing since the beginning, since when I come to Indonesia. And it helps me, spread my word and the refugee situation and show my, especially basically show my anger to the world that I'm angry with you, the way you are treating me. I'm not, the way what you are thinking. I'm a human being. Just because I fled from my country and you call me refugee doesn't mean I don't have the feeling of sense, equality, and the human rights. So that's why the reason why I choose to be a journalist is to show my anger to the world that I'm angry with you, the way you are treating me.
Thank you. That's so powerful. Like writing as a way of expressing anger, and why not, right? It's a system that
Yes.
Immobilizes you. Thank you. And then can we hear from Warsan?
Absolutely, yes. And really, this question is very big. When you say what the writing meaning to you, I can say it's a space of my freedom. And my pen is a voice of voiceless. And I don't have any freedom, or I don't have any rights of this world as a refugee woman or as an African woman. But my pen and my notebook are my best friend. When I reach my pen on my notebook, I am freely feel free. No one touch me. No one telling me something. I can write whatever I want. So writing to me is a healing. So it's just like some people use a medicine, right, to increase the pain. So I use writing and I feel relief, like it's my daily medicine. As a writer, I show my experience and reality for refugee girls and women. They're resilient and they're vulnerable. And my pen is a voice of refugee women, how they are suffering and miserable in this life they are in and the life they was facing in their homelands. So as a writer, I support myself and other refugee women to be heard their story and fight and my voice finding their rights. So I can say, agree, brother Bohors, the pen or the writing is a weapon. It's the only weapon I have today. Positively and negative, I can show the global audience. Start from this room. Who am I? What I am suffering? What I want from you? And how I can reach somewhere. And to be represent the girls like me doesn't get any chance that I have today. So as a person, I'm not stand to be writing such myself, but I am represented all refugee women and immigrant women they are suffering from under the rooms. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. I think it's really important to actually push your voice as a refugee woman. I guess, yeah, I still have so many questions as always, but I guess what my last request for this round is that, if you have any excerpts from your writing you want to share, can we use the time for that so that people can hear from your work? Does anyone want to share?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I have written a passage about a strange night. I'm based in Batam City in a refugee shelter run by IM. So a couple of weeks ago, I wrote a passage about a strange night, but today I want to read it for the audience. A strange night. I live on the top floor of a four-story building in IM refugee shelter in Indonesia. Tonight, I sit by the window, my chair a rough-hewn branch from a fallen tree. The window overlooks the international ferry terminal in the Singaporean skyscrapers. The city is unusually quiet. No ferries are on the move towards Singapore. The terminal looks empty. The unusual bustling sounds of activities cannot be heard. In the sky, no planes fly to Singapore. Silence conquers the shelter. I cannot hear the happy sound of the young, energetic refugee who lives on the third floor. On ordinary nights, he plays cards and shouts loudly, disturbing everyone cramped in their tiny rooms. Tonight, even his voice does not ring in my ears. Heavy rain stopped about an hour ago, and now the crickets are awake. I listen to their chirping. I feel the crickets sense the city's unfamiliar quietness. Silence conquers the shelter. Even the strongest and healthiest people, including the happy guy on the third floor, are eventually silenced in this situation, which demands many, many years of waiting to secure the right to live in peace and freedom. The crickets are the only living creatures that accompany me through this dark, unusually silent night. This past week, I have been different. I have been unable to sleep well or eat properly. All this strangeness is the result of living with relentless uncertainty. I sense my body is glued into the chair. It doesn't want to go anywhere now. As the time passes and the night gets darker, the weather becomes cooler and more tolerable. Sunk in my scattered thoughts, my eyes fixed on the beautiful lights of the ferry terminal. I breathe in the cooling breeze that blows in and kisses my face. For a brief moment, the memory of sitting at the wooden window back home in Afghanistan revives in my mind. As night fell over our rocky village, I would leave our mud house and sit in front of the window, waiting for my father to arrive home from the bazaar or market. The moment he walked into the view and neared home, we kids all ran to greet him, climbing on his shoulders as if we were climbing my favorite apricot tree that bears such mouth-wateringly sweet fruit. When our mother came out to warn us to let our father rest, we would go back into the house where we waited in intolerable excitement for him to come in, open his bag, and distribute the banana and oranges he brought us. My childhood dream of waiting every evening for my father to get home was fulfilled, but my dreams of finding a place to call safe home have become old, but remain unfulfilled. Gradually, tomorrow's heat replaces the cooling breeze. I return to my room and sink into my bed, preparing for the arrival of another day of waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay, so now, Jenya, you want to share your story?
Okay.
Okay.
So I have written a story which is to represent and tell the world a similar story, of refugees and the citizen of the world. For example, this pandemic has created a very similar situation between refugees and then the rest of the world. The uncertainty that the world is facing right now. So I wanted to link the world with the refugees and the situation in this situation, so that they can understand each other better, how the refugees uncertainty has been ongoing forever. So I've written this, I'm still working on this, how it's feel like, how it's feel like to remain in uncertainty forever. COVID-19 has created, or COVID-19 has given those in free world a state of how it feel like, to live with daily uncertainty. But for them, the uncertainty is likely to last only a short while, soon to be over. Many people are already getting back to their accustomed busy life. Meanwhile, refugees' life will continue to be marred by uncertainty indefinitely, or maybe just until they die. The world does not care enough to create a vaccine for refugee status. I asked some of my fellow refugees what they think about this pandemic. They replied, this is nothing compared to what we have been suffering for years without any certainty of our future. It will be better if the virus can give us a quick death rather than dying every day, of physical and mental suffering. Refugees' uncertainty start on the day when they flee war, genocide, persecution in their country. As refugees take flight in wooden boats, they do not know whether they will live long enough to see tomorrow, or where they will end up. When they finally make it to a distant land, they are detained. There is no certainty of their release. If they are lucky enough to be freed after 4 or 5 years of imprisonment, it is only to be moved to community shelter, where they remain trapped in limbo with no official status and still no certainty about their future. This is the answer by nearly 80 million refugees all over the world, around the world, in Indonesia. In Indonesia, 14,000 refugees have stagnated in indefinite limbo for more than a decade already. Proof of this can be found in the indefinite stalements of refugee processing for resettlement to save third countries. The anxious and indefinite wait destroys people's well-being, crushes their hopes of freedom from persecution, isolation, and exclusion. They doubt they will find a real opportunity to rebuild their lives. As the saying goes, life is hope. Without hope, there is no life. In the past 6 months alone, 6 refugees have given up on their lonely journey in uncertainty. Since 2014, 13 refugees have taken their own life in Indonesia alone. Before this pandemic, a slim number of refugees were hoping to be resettled. Now, many countries have totally closed their borders, pushing the pandemic as an excuse. Refugees are waiting to see some changes in their lives, yet their days and years slip away as they lose their will to live. Most of them do not even remember date anymore. Some have even forgotten their birthday. Their patience to wait for a hopeful change has dried out at this point. Change seems to remain as ever-present dreams, just a step ahead or two to remove from the reality, but cruelty, inaccessible. Many fled from war and conflict in the hope of helping their loved ones, eventually pursuing their life goal and ambition. Despite their bravery, resilience, and resourcefulness, and in managing their escape, they continue to stagnate in legal limbo. Refugees are not crises. Yes, we do come from a far away from different part of the world, and we often are from distant religion, but we too are human beings, simply seeking safety and peace after fleeing war and conflict, genocide in our country. Yet our very existence is denied at the face of modern world, rendering us as illegal immigrants or stateless, as if we are less human beings. Refugees seeking sanctuary, a source of hope, and a place of heavens. Yep. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janayat.
Thank you. I would like.
Yeah, we would like to hear from you, Warsan, before we move on to the questions from the audience. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Respect the time. I just want to choose the story. And this story is one of memorial story. It's a fiction story. I hope in the near future will be a book, but it will be published in chapters. It's very long, but I will just choose the first part because of time. This story is called Blacklisted Girl. Blacklisted girl means the girl without not the list of humanity. She's kicked out. And this story is based on true story that I was witness for it. And it is started like that. It was a dark day for her and the rest of her family, and it was a day her name changed, losing her ethic and family, the name she has before. It was a day she cannot helping herself in a word or another to become a survivor. That day become a blacklisted girl or black history was written. Everyone was there or have a connection with her. Normally killing, shooting, kidnapping, and other things for individual target, it is okay for her city. But this day was changed everything taken the situation in hazardous way. It was bloody, disaster day to make her broken, unhealed injury from herself, and reminded her to be paralyzed. What then that day? The sunrise was coming out. The sunrise comes us with beautiful clothes and cool environment. Everybody likes to stay longer for sleeping because of the climate. But like normal for a family, mothers start calling everyone or her to wake up and start the day duties. Blacklisted girl wake up in the normally morning like other days, and that morning exciting to go her KG school with the neighbor kids. Every day of her first day in the school, in the first week of school, have a special excitement to the school early than the other days. All students and teachers are fresh after 2 days of weekend. And the morning there's a special performance between the students. After fun and well played with happiness because the week of that week her class representative become the winners of performance. They give a lot of joy and their day school was very well. Coming back to school always involved walking under hot sun from 15 minutes walking. They didn't play, just they focus reaching houses and using running to arrive early and share to their families the school day. This is start. Where's her home? No home there. It's a blood burning body, clothes, everybody in shock and looking her. But she's looking around and find her home. Mother, dad, all houses is smoked. Some people check the bodies for the other people. Her friends start crying and collecting clothes by screaming, Dad, Dad, Mom, Mom, where are you? The screaming and running, she understood every word come from the kids, but she can't fully speak well like them because of age. And the black girl listed keep crying and sit inside the smoke. Area people ask her what's her family name. They can recognize any relative. But she kept crying until people pick her inside the empty sad and smoke area with her handmade toy and trying today by waiting for her family never come back again. And she went to sleep like last night. Unfortunately, the black girlist arrived at a house full of kids shouting and screaming. Because of time, I will stop there and you will publish the Archipelago. You will follow up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Warsan. I guess just to follow up on that, we have several questions, but I would like to start with you, Warsan, because there's a question here from Selma. Warsan, do you mind sharing your thoughts and experiences regarding the challenges, stigmas, and stereotypes you have to face as a woman refugee, and why do you think voicing refugees' violation of human rights is important for women?
Thank you very much for asking this question. Yes, I will share in the near future many different articles about the women. And also I want to leading now a big surface of mental health for refugee women and generally refugee women. To back you my experience, you can imagine a girl was born in an eco and a war-zone area and never see the fun of peace, face it for different violence mentally and physically, and then arrive with uncertainty country. Country haven't any rights for refugee, and on behalf of refugee women are under pressure because of silence, because of health issues, because abuses they made it. And it is really, when you see the refugee community generally are vulnerable group in Indonesia, but refugee women are the most suffering. They don't have traditionally and systematically in this country, anything is time for them. So stigma, trauma, mental problem, abuse marriage, abuses they met when they were that country is still follow up and there's no sort. Where do you think the voice of refugee violation in human rights important for women? I believe the refugee women are most needed get their rights because they are the most needed people. As I am a founder of Refugee Women Project and involved for the last 5 years as a SGBV interpreters, I really realized that more than 11 countries for refugee women staying in Indonesia are the most miserable and suffering women. And as you believe the women are important to get human rights violation because of they are foundation of this community mentally, physically. So I believe if the women are safe, the rest of community can be survived. That's why I always be activism and talk to voice of refugee women. Thank you. I think I will answer your question.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And there's this question from Des. I read that there are so many problems that the refugees in Indonesia need to face. The insufficient monthly allowance fund and the violence or harassment that they're facing. My questions, what about the kinship among refugees? One. Two, how the government or any organization like UNHCR accommodate the needs of the refugee, especially when it deals with the psychological side. And then three, what are your next goals in the future? Maybe we can start with Janayat.
All right, this is a really great question. Very, very important question that is happening to refugees. Yes. Well, what we can see here, Indonesia, as we all know, is non-signatory, means that Indonesian government does not take any responsibility to what refugee whatsoever, including health services, financial security, and also other sort of living cost security. So refugees are left alone, and they are left under the care of international NGOs. As we all know that NGOs and organizations work in their own interests, in their own field, they will only work, for refugees, within their, interest limit. So there are many refugees that are, not registered with the IOM there are about 7,000 refugees in Jakarta who are forced to fend themselves. So these refugees, cannot work, cannot do anything to survive. Yes, so which means these refugees are literally surviving on the mercy of sometimes occasional NGOs help, and also the help from their families and friends back home. And as we may have seen, some 250 refugee were accommodated in the Khalidres, and this accommodation is an abandoned military building, and there is no running electricity, no water. They were just left there and said, okay, this is home, and you stay there without anything, and they don't receive any food. So they're just relying on occasional, the local help. So that's the problem. And refugee in Indonesia has nothing. Refugees are like, living, like I described in one of my writing as, walking dead, without right, without recognition. So they're just illegal immigrants. They don't have activities to do. They can't work. They can't go to school. They can't go to university. So it's like, an indefinite limbo. That's what I described in my writings. So they have been trapped here for more than 10 years, and many refugees are dying yearly, monthly. Just in these 2 weeks, in this week, 2 refugees died. One is suffering from mentally, and the other one's without any reasons. And I have been counting the death of refugees dying without any reason, suffering from mentally, and about the mental situation. There are hardly any sort of psychological consultant available for refugees. So that's one thing that refugees are suffering. And the other thing is that even if there are psychologists to treat refugees, there are psychological consultant available for refugees. The next day, after the consolation, the next day refugee will continue to suffer because the situation is still the same. So as long as they remain in the same situation, psychologists and psychological consultant will not help anything at all. So what need to improve is to improve the situation of refugee, is pressure the government to change the policy of refugees and create a sense of livelihood in Indonesia, so that they can at least free from mental suffering. Forget about giving them citizenship or other thing, but at least create some sort of solutions like basic right and work right and go to school, so that they can at least free from mental suffering. So in order to do so, the citizen of Indonesia now need to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's it's really important to identify like concrete actions and the problems with the system. There's this because we're running out of time. I would like to ask this one last question. So this is from Ari. Thank you for such inspiring readings. Is writing where you find your home? Is it a transitory site, or is it how you move? So anyone can answer this. Is writing where you find home? Is it a transitory site, or is it how you move?
I can say this our own writing based on our creativity and experience. It is not something we reading from books or something like that. It is, we are just represented what the life teaches us. And we are telling the rest of the world how the refugee writers are productive, not only to tell their story, also they have a talent to do this job. As you see, Janayat as a journalist, he's just become a great journalist inside in Indonesia, doing many things, articles. I like as a many refugee flowers, this is their how to move on their dreams, how to move on the humanity, how to represent it and show the other rest of Indonesia. Like for example, the Indonesian always they are translated in Bahasa. So the Archipelago, we would like to have a co-writing and then explore how Indonesia is beautiful, great, and productive and resourceful the rest of the world in our languages or our native language. That is how to move together from all of us somewhere. So I can say this is a moving somewhere towards our dreams and to be better world as a refugee, as a non-refugee together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warsan. So what I would like to do now is, so we are moving to the closing part of this session. So what I want to do is to just share what I can summarize from this conversation, and then I would like you to say your last statements, maybe for 1 or 2 minutes from the 5 of you, maybe something that we haven't covered, but you really want to make sure that people are aware of this. So I guess we've been talking about writing. We started with writing as resistance, but like Erfan also mentioned that writing is about caring for the community and for himself, and Beru's mentioned about rioting and writing, so there are different forms of resistance, and people here have been resisting through various means, various creative means, fiction, poetry, journalism, with various themes, time, like we see in Beru's film, time that stands still, and uncertainty, the idea of freedom, the idea of resilience, and what Warsan mentioned, which I think is really important, gender, because women face different challenges as refugees. And what's really interesting is the network, the importance of the collective, to strengthen each other and to actually maintain that that idea that you need other people as writers, not just as refugees, but as writers. And then finally, I guess, to counter the mainstream narrative, or what Omid calls the refugee industry, where people exploit the refugee stories, you need to see your writing and translating as an act of decolonial intervention, and therefore the refugees must own the discourse. They're not just being represented there, but they should tell their stories. So let's hear from people. Can we start with the Archipelago writers, and then Omid and Behruz? So maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, Erfan, Janayat, and Warsan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then my last message in our today's panel is that first I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude for Makassar International Writing Festival, to all of you for organizing and inviting us to talk on the behalf of Archipelago, and also expressing the concerns and the plights of refugees that they are grappling with in their day-to-day lives. The situation for refugees in Indonesia is very critical now, and the waiting is getting longer and longer, and the disappointment is growing bigger and bigger, and the number of refugee acceptance through UNHCR is becoming smaller and smaller. And our mental and psychological health deteriorates with each passing day. And this, since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we find ourselves in a more critical, in a more, inhuman and isolated situation and condition. So for those who can do something for refugees, to be their voice, to raise their concerns, I request them to help the refugees in Indonesia, help them to raise their voice for the world, and for the local people, for the Indonesian people, what they can do to support refugees during the time of pandemic. I think the UNHCR is when we turn up to UNHCR for help, when we turn up to them to find us a comprehensive solution or a durable solution, they tell us that if you cannot bear the situation, you can return to where you have come from. I mean, like in Afghanistan, for instance, Taliban is now settling over my country, and I cannot go there. If I go, I will get killed. I will get murdered. So UNHCR is responsible. UNHCR is responsible to find a comprehensive solution for refugees in Indonesia. So whenever we turn up to them, that is their answer. If you don't like the situation, if you cannot bear living here, you can return to your country. So what can local do to support us in this situation? I mean, they can talk to their members of parliament. They can talk to the government to put, pressure on the UNHCR to talk to the resettlement or refugee taking countries to increase the number of refugees, to increase the number of annual refugee acceptance from UNHCR. Thank you so much.
I would
Thank
like
you.
to add, yep, sorry, I would
Yeah,
like to add a
Junaid,
little
yeah.
bit on this, yep. Well, Arfandana has already clear up the things that what refugee need, but I just wanted to add a little bit here. We know that there are 14,000 refugees in Indonesia, and it is unlikely that all the refugees will be able to resettle from Indonesia. As we can see, the refugee number is increasing all over the world, and it has increased to 80 million refugees now. So which means resettlement country has also reduced the number of intake from all over the world, and Australia was the main destination country for refugees, for most of the refugees in Indonesia, but Australia has totally stopped. And since it has implemented the sovereign border operation border policy, and it has affected the refugees in Indonesia, it's not just the policy that implemented in Manus and Nauru, it has stretched toward Indonesia, because Indonesia is the first gate where refugee take boat to Australia. So because of this policy, refugee has stranded in Indonesia. And regarding the situation and the understanding of the global refugee crisis, we need to learn to accept that this is something that's happening and that we need to contribute to the world. So Indonesia, even if it doesn't sign the convention, it doesn't mean that it cannot be a part of humanity. It cannot be a part of doing good thing. And it's also a crisis of in Asia. It is not fully responsible, a fully responsible crisis for only Western countries. Why it should be only Western countries that is resolving refugee situations, that is doing humanitarian work. So why not ASEAN country take a step now? And Indonesia is one of the ASEAN leaders in the Asian country and a leading country in Asia. So I think Indonesia can start doing, on refugee things, and then and learn to accept refugees. At the end of the day, refugee will be remaining in Indonesia. Half of the population of refugee will be remaining in Indonesia. And if they continue to remain like this, so their reason would be the death. So as we can see, many people are dying. So I would like to encourage, and my fellow citizen of Indonesia, I am a part of Indonesia and I've been living in Indonesia for 8 years. So I feel like I am at home now. I feel like Indonesia is my home now. So that's why I call you my fellow citizen of Indonesia, that it is important for you, to do something for refugees, because we cannot rely on the government at the moment. We have relied on government for 10 years, for 8 years. NGOs, nobody has done anything to create a sustainable solution for us. So that's why I call on to the Indonesian citizen. It is time, it is time for Indonesia to do something for refugees, to save the life of many, because refugees are on the bridge of, dying, like, without any solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Junaid. Warthan?
Yeah, thank you very much. My friend is already covered the message and statement for refugees. I want to just add one sentence. If you are a human, you can stand up by human. So if you believe the refugee is human, you want to do something. I would like to share you one message as the Archipelago team. This magazine online, we are welcoming and we are a call for friend in Indonesian writers, Australian writers, wherever you are in the world. to collaborate us to write together and to reach our voices as a refugee. So this is called building connection, but and making our great network as a writers, journalists, artists, photographers, all that people can submit their work in this email addresses in the here. And also we want to pay them, like we want to create any kind of livelihood activity that can be survival role for refugees. So the Archipelago, we want to use the strength and creativity and talent for refugees to reach their dreams. So I want to call university people as those who can, even in the future, we planning not to stay in English language, also having an Indonesian language. So everything start from understanding each other. So if you are become listeners like us, you will understand more about refugee, the positive and negative, and that will be helping us our next future or the next step. What we can figure out ourselves. So all the refugee initiatives, writers, photographers, and talent people, we are not competitions. We are helping each other, and we are a stand for humanity wherever we are diversity. So the Archipelago, you will make a more friends, like more than 20 countries around the world. Like today you have a Somalian friend, you have an African friend, you have Afghanistan friend. So that means there's a more waiting you there. So don't hesitate your language, don't afraid if you are not well trained writer. There is a consultants, editors to guiding with you. You join our workshops and we become co-writing. And that really will be empowering for refugee women as I am one of them, and we want to create a good space for refugee women and the rest of refugee. So thank you for your time, and I want to appreciate the bottom of my heart all the best on the nice time with you today. Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Arsan. And then Omid.
Thank you. Just very brief final words. I think we're dealing with two pandemics. We have to be realistic and we need to confront the reality that we're dealing with two pandemics. One of them is recent, COVID-19, but the other one is much older, and that's the pandemic of colonialism. And in fact, colonialism created the conditions for the more recent pandemic. And Australia, as the most powerful nation state in this particular region, has created. It was created as a result of colonialism, as a result of the program or the enterprise of creating an offshore prison, and that prison has morphed and multiplied into other prisons. So now we have an archipelago of prisons. But I think maybe to use the title of the project that was really beautifully introduced today, we also have an archipelago of letters, an archipelago of writing that's also taking place. And here we can see maybe the possibilities for new kinds of resistance. There is the archipelago of prisons, and we have an archipelago of resistance through letters, through writing. So let's identify where the problem comes from, and let's think about strategies to dismantle and decolonize.
Thank you so much. I like that archipelago of writing or letters. And finally, can we have a last statement from Behrooz? You are still muted.
Yeah, my statement is just I would like to appreciate you, the festival, for creating this space, and also for Warsan. I think what she's doing is very important. Junaid and Erfan, and also Omid. Yeah, thank you very much. I think this works that you are doing is just going down to history, And that discourse that I was talking about, I think you are impacting the discourse. You are creating this knowledge that we needed, this knowledge which just come from the true people and true stories. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. So that wraps up the panel really well. Thank you for your powerful message, Behrooz, and for the others too, Ahmed, Warsan, John, and Irfan. Very powerful words. So many. So much to take in. So it's been an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you as well to the audience for being with us. So please remind your friends and colleagues, and also the refugee writers. If they miss this session, they'll be able to see the recording on the Rumata Art Space YouTube channel. And more information about Makassar International Writers Festivals programs can be accessed through Instagram and Twitter, Makassar Writers, and the website makassarwriters.com. So thank you so much, everyone. Stay safe, stay well. Terima kasih dan selamat malam.
Thank you.